Okay, this is my March reading wrap up. In March, I read 7 books. 2 of them are on the International Booker Prize long list, which was really cool. Both of them I read in French. I actually read 3 books in French this month, which is really cool for me because it was a goal of mine to read more in French. So that's what I'm doing. But all of them have English translation, so I'll talk about those with that caveat. There is some nonfiction in here. There's like a 650-page book. So 7 was pretty great this month because I read a huge like brick of a novel. I'm excited to get into it. So let's just start talking about these books. The Rights Readathon happened from March 21st to March 31st, which is Trans Day Visibility. And it's a readathon that calls on readers and book lovers to support and uplift trans voices, to read books written by trans people and featuring trans characters and/or featuring trans characters. It's just this really great thing that's been happening for 3 years now, and that I've participated in every year. This year, March came so quick, and I wasn't prepared for it in a sense. But there were books on my TBR that were written by trans people, so I was able to participate anyways. The last week of March was long and hard outside of my reading life. And so I only got to 1 book and I got through part of a second book, but I'm going to save that one for April because I'm not done. So the book I read was Stag Dance by Tori Peters, which I was so excited about. This came out March 11th. And it's essentially a novella and then 3 short stories around that novella. And all of them are absolutely twisted, weird, kooky, like messy, strange. Some of them are speculative and some of them are just like light horror. Really fascinating. And I love that she did this after having such a successful first novel. Her debut, Detransition Baby, like people still talk about, people are still just pushing that book, and I am currently reading it because I wanted to see if I loved it as much as I remember loving it the first time. And so far it is so good. There's something about the way Tori Peters talks about the trans experience in a way where it's like, it's not written for cis people or to be palatable to cis people. It's not written to like coddle people who don't have this experience. It's really written as like a true trans experience in so many ways. This book talks about gender and sexuality in really, really fascinating ways. I never thought that I would read the word brick in the way that it's talked about in this book ever. From like, and she's like a very celebrated author. That's why it's so funny to me that she's like, she doesn't care and she's doing it, and she's doing it with a purpose. And I think that's fascinating and just brilliant. My favorite part of this collection are the 2 first short stories, which are Infect Your Friends and Loved Ones and The Chaser. The second one, The Chaser, will really stick with me for a long time. It's just so juicy and good. And the first one is really interesting too. I want to read a full that's the thing with short stories. I say this every time. Short stories, when they're good, they make me want a full novel of that short story. And these did that to me. So Tori Peters is doing something right. Her writing is really, really good. There's something about her writing that's like, it just flows really nicely and it's easy to read, but that's not a diss. Like, that is a compliment. She writes really, really well, and it reads just like perfectly. And I really love her, and I love this cover. And I wish that I got the PR box with the hat. I'm wearing this one in honor of that, but I did not get it. So one day, perhaps. Yeah, I have only amazing things to say about Tori Peters so far, and I will keep you posted of what I think of Detransition Baby next month when I finish it. Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan is a book that a lot of people have been talking about. It's an Irish novella about a sleepy Irish town on the seaside where not much happens, and we follow this like family man as he goes about his days and goes about his life. And he knows everyone in the town, and then, it's just about like life and small things, hence the title. And I found it so profound, and like, people don't warn you about this. I thought it was going to be like fun and like, it is. I was floored by how much it affected me, and how like it's all in the minutia of it, and it's so well. I think it's like 100. I don't know how many pages. It's 120 pages maybe, but it is truly just wild how much it affected me in so little time. It's about the world around you, like the veneer of the world cracking, and how one small moment can change your view on everything and everyone you've ever known. It's about past and present sort of melding. It's about taking off your rose-colored glasses. It's about being so close to the trees that you can't see the forest. It's about coming up for air. There's a part where he talks about like, this can't be it. Life can't just be going to work, going home, and then going to work, and then coming home. And that, oh my God, it's too much. It was too much. And it's like one sentence, but for some reason felt so loud and was like screaming at me off the page. It was just really, really well done. And I highly recommend it if you can get your hands on it. Just do it. Just read it. It's 120 pages, and you're going to have a very interesting time with it. And I think it's going to affect people in different ways. Like, every single person's going to read it differently. But that's what really stood out to me was, like, I guess nihilism is bad, but the idea that your entire life has led up to something, and then when you get there, you kind of think, what's next? Like, what's the next thing? And sometimes that can be really difficult. And in this book, it's difficult. Quarro Fauve by Nastasia Martin, which has an English translation called In the Eye of the Wild. This is one of the books that when I made a video and I said I wanted to read more in French, and someone recommended this book as a book that talks about the duality of a person and like animal versus human, like what that can feel like inside of you. And I'm really interested in that topic because I'm writing about that topic for a project that I'm working on. But that's not really what this did. It does it like in an interesting way, but not the way that I'm thinking about it. But I still really liked this read. I was 50 pages in when I found out that this is actually a memoir and it's autofiction. It's not fiction. It's essentially about a woman. She's an anthropologist and she studies different remote communities. And in 2014, I believe, 2015, she was in like the depths of remote Russia, and she survives a bear attack. And it's her experience of going through that and what survival feels like when you're faced with being disfigured and like feeling completely different and all sorts of stuff. So interesting. The book talks about helplessness in the face of the medical system, partly because of language, because she's in Russia, but also because of misogyny. She has these experiences with these male doctors that are really negative and not great. The way that they talk about other people around her when they think she can't hear, like that sort of stuff is really, really interesting, the way that it's talked about in this book. And also, we have her like in a hospital bed for a really long time, sort of ruminating on everything and trying to like think about what's going on. She's getting like metal plates like stuck to her head, like that sort of, it's just wild. And her experience of healing and her healing journey is really interesting in the way that she talks about it, because for her, it was a growing distance between who she was and who she was becoming, instead of this idea that like healing is trying to get you back to stasis, to like something that's what it was before, if that makes sense. Like that's not what she describes it as. She describes it as this event completely changed her and she will never be the same and she can't be the same. And knowing that and feeling that as she's healing was like really difficult and really hard. Yeah, I just had a really good time with this book. It's really, there's something like that feels like turmoil in it, which is really interesting. And I love the way that it talks about healing and like being changed by an event and just like trauma. Yeah, really great. Ugliness by Mashtari Halal is a fascinating book. This was translated from German by Elizabeth Laufer, and the author reached out to me, wanted to send this to me, and I could not say yes fast enough. This was such a fascinating read. It's nonfiction, it's sort of essay, it's sort of poetry. There's a lot of things going on in it, but essentially it does talk about the body and ugliness and beauty and who gets to decide what is beautiful, who gets to decide what's ugly, who's ugly. It like zooms out from a societal and cultural point, but then it zooms in really personal with her experiences, and she talks about her past, and it's just so fascinating. The author and I are the same age, and we have a similar experience of poring over the glossy pages of magazines as kids. And so a lot of what she was saying around that and the way that it shaped her understanding and her perspective of herself and also the world and beauty in general, I really related to, and I found myself like really called by a lot of what she was saying. And she's just brilliant. This is big brain energy. She's like so cool, so smart. Just, I'm in awe of this piece. It's, yeah, this was really, really good. She talks about ugliness as like a learned fixation on yourself, on your body, and ugliness being the difference between what you are and what you want to be. And that is shaped by your circumstances, by society, by culture, by all sorts of things. It was just really, really fascinating. And there's a poem that I want to read. It's on page 14. It's called Dream Body. Dream Body. Daydreams become blueprints, then battle plans. A skinny kid doubles over. She slaps her thighs, hangs herself up by her hairy armpits. She scratches her stubbly arms and puffs her flat chest. She takes an axe and chops her nose in two. One piece is buried, the other placed in her mother's calloused hands. Mother, I am going into battle. With blade to cheek, your daughter under my blade. She's just brilliant. This is gorgeous, and I want to, gorgeous, interesting word to use when talking about a piece about ugliness. Anyways, it was just really great, and I highly recommend it. Love this book. Un monstre est là derrière la porte by Gaël Bellem, which was translated to English, and it's called There's a Monster Behind the Door. This was longlisted for the International Booker Prize this year, and for me, this book doesn't do what I think it sets out to do, and it's not as effective as I think it could have been. It's essentially a coming of age of a girl growing up on La Réunion, the island, and she grows up in this like really difficult family context, really difficult context, and they're a very underprivileged family. And her parents, like, we get their story through her, and like it's part of the way that she tells the story. And they fall in love. It's like this beautiful thing, and then they like, it turns to violence. It turns into like this really negative experience. And then she's born into that context, into disappointment, into anger, into violence. She grows up to be spunky and like stands up to her family a little bit. And she's sort of an anti-hero. She then loses herself in books. And I think there's just a lot going on the coming of age like part of it. And there's a lot going on in terms of like context, geographically, if you will, like her life in that place. And there's just so many things that are happening at once that I think it loses like direction for me. Like I sort of felt like it was meandering in the middle, and didn't have like a clear direction to me of where we were going, what we were doing there. There meaning like in the story. But overall, like I'm happy that I read it. I've never read a book that was set in La Réunion. And it's a place that I know about. But yeah, I've never read about in this way. The writing was super sharp, really beautiful, like just fabulous, fabulous writing. I would really want to read more from this writer. And I read it in French, so like it is the original work. But I think there's something about the way this story is constructed that like didn't quite, the way time works also was like a little bit off for me. And this is like an oversimplification of the book, but it had a lot of parallels to Annie John by Jamaica Kincaid, which I just read in January, because it talks about like this growing up on an island and the island as a setting, and the culture of the island, the way that it is at odds with the community that's colonizing, the culture that's colonizing, all that sort of stuff. So it had a lot of parallels in that way. Both the narrators are really spunky and like stand up to the people around them. And I think for Annie John, there was just more of a emotional through line that I didn't find in this one. So that's where I think like I had just read it and I felt like I'd read it done in this way that really affected me. And I think here it didn't have that same impact, which just made it more obvious because I just read Annie John, if that makes sense. But I still liked it. I would still like it to be shortlisted. I'm reading a lot of Booker Prize nominees, apparently. That's something I'm doing. And this one is definitely really, really good. And I love what it's saying. And I think it's saying something that's really interesting and different and something I've never read in this way. The Bee Sting by Paul Murray is a book that a lot of people recommended. A lot of people were talking about. This was on the Booker Prize shortlist in 2023. It is 650 pages, so I was intimidated by it for a very long time, and I'm glad that I finally read it. And I read it in a sleepy month of March. There was a lot going on in March, but for some reason, like finding a book that I could just lose myself in for like a week and a half was really lovely. Um, this book is about a family in like a small Irish town, um, and they are four people, and their lives are dug into so deeply, and they're rendered so perfectly. I don't know how Paul Murray was able to give me like 12-year-old teenage girl, maybe 14. I don't actually know how old she is. 14-year-old teenage girl, like 10-year-old boy, and then like mother and father, and do all of it so effortlessly and make it feel so real. Like these characters jump off the page and their backstories are dealt with in a really interesting way. It twists, it turns, it's just doing a lot, and it was really fascinating. In terms of form, the book does something in the middle that I didn't love. Essentially, each person in the family gets their own section. It starts with the daughter, then it goes to the son, and then it goes to the mother, and then the father. And the mother section, there's no punctuation. She doesn't have any periods at anywhere in her for like 150 pages, and that was like, it's interesting, and I understand the purpose of it. I don't think it was as effective as he thought it was going to be. Do you know? Like, I think it was just more distracting than anything. Yes, I got used to it after a while. It's like Sally Rooney without quotation marks. Like, it's fine, but I don't think it was doing anything to add to the story for me. Um, and then when we dug into her past, I thought that there would be like a point where like her narration starts that way because of something traumatic that happens. But no, it was just like always. So anyways, I didn't love that part, but the story itself, really, really fascinating. So much humanity in this, really well done. And again, like, how was he able to do teenage girl so well? And then, like, this struggling father figure in a family that's like, ugh, I don't want to give too much away, but this had a lull in the middle, and I was like, I don't know if I can finish 650. I was like 400 pages in, and I was like, my. At a certain point, it felt long, but then it got me all the way together for the last 250 pages. I read them so quickly, and at the end, for I think like 100 pages, it just goes back and forth between each character, and it is so electric, and it is so well done. I really love this book, but it's 650 pages, so buckle up. You know what I mean? Naufrage by Vincent Delacroix, translated into English, it's called Small Boat. This is also an International Booker Prize longlist this year. This book is really slim. It's it's inspired by a true story where 28 migrants were traveling through the channel, like the English Channel between the UK and France. And essentially, like, both countries were sort of like tossing the baton to each other of like who would save them because their boat was sinking. And it is told from the perspective mostly of the woman who was like Coast Guard 911 operator for in the French side. And she did not send help, and those people died, which is just really sad. And it tells her story in a really like apathetic, desensitized way. You feel her having completely lost her ability to like grapple with humanity and like human life because she experiences this so often. And she finds like anyone else to blame. She's being questioned by the authorities about what happened and all sorts of things, and they're reading transcripts of things that she said. And then we also get a section where you get this like bird's eye view of the boat itself and what happened, which was it was bone chilling. It was so well done. This book talks about like morality and like the gray, and it reminded me of the trolley problem the whole time, like whose responsibility, just responsibility in this sense was so interesting because this woman feels no responsibility yet is technically responsible as her job. Just really fascinating. I think where this book sort of fell short for me, and I'm really happy that it is so short, because I think had it gone longer, I would have sort of lost interest. She meanders for a really long time about trying to make excuses for what happened, trying to like compartmentalize the person that she like hears the phone calls back, and she's like yeah, but you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of like excuses that are being made. And I think if it had gone longer, I couldn't have stayed on the hook with her for that long. Um, because I get it, and it's a really interesting decision in terms of fiction. But when you think about the fact that it is based on a true story, it's like it just makes it so much sadder. Um, I don't know that the true story has this like uh, person on the Coast Guard who had these feelings and did these things, but um, it's just we're talking about real people. We're talking about like human life, and it's like it's done in a really interesting way. And I think had it gone longer, I would have I would have checked out. At the end, I was like, I get it. I get how she feels this way, and I get what got her to this point, and I just didn't want to hear about it anymore, if that makes sense. Which is really interesting. It like this book brought up a lot of feelings for me, and I enjoyed it. I did. I liked it. I thought it was really well done. I thought it was a brilliant idea and execution, just really, really fascinating. Um, and I'm glad it was as short as it was because longer would have been harder. That's it. That was my month of March. I had a really busy month of March outside of my reading life, but I still managed to read some really amazing books, so I'm happy about that. I have been using my public library a lot, which is really exciting. So that's why you see some of the books I don't have physically because I got them from the library, which is fabulous. I love going in there, submitting a request on a bunch of books, and then like watching them trickle in and reading them. There's just like a really nice cadence going, and it's been lovely. So support your public libraries. They're the real ones. But that's it. I would love to know what you read in March and loved and want to put on my radar. Please let me know in the comments. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.